Sure. Eyes for the track format. Clean copy. Have a copy of this meeting. Previous one here. Who's going to be on for? There was some email.
Otherwise, I think the rest of the stuff could go fast as 30 minutes.
What? Somebody wasn't going to be here because of COVID.
Christine, she's on
Ah,
virtually.
yeah. All set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're up and rolling.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this special village board meeting to order at 6:02 on November 17th. October the 7th.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jensen. Here. Martin. Here. Nellis.
Here.
Pat.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Summers.
Here.
Yates.
Here.
All present.
Statement of public notice.
Is there a question?
Item 5 pursuant to Wisconsin statute 66.0617. After having conducted a public hearing on October 11th, 2022, consider and take possible action to repeal the current Village of Land and Water Impact Fee Ordinance, Chapter 63, effective upon the effective date of the adoption of a resolution to establish a reserve capacity assessment to be known as resolution number 2021-11 for municipal water service. The document effectuating the amendment of chapter 63 to basically repeal it has been distributed previously, and the purpose of this is basically to eliminate further utilization of the impact fee ordinance in anticipation of the adoption of a reserve capacity assessment. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I know there's no citizen comments, but Don, you said resolution 2021-11, and it's for the record 2022.
2022-11. Sorry,
I'm sorry, just,
thank you.
If we don't have any questions or discussion, I would make a motion to repeal the current Village of Land and Water Impact Fee Ordinance, Chapter 63, effective upon the effective date of the adoption of the resolution to establish the reserve capacity assessment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 6, consideration and establishment of protocol to be followed by staff in processing refunds under to be known as resolution number 2022-11. Becker, as you may recall, during the course of the public hearings that were held on October the 11th, the question came up. I guess there were a couple of questions as to how the village intended to handle a processing a refund for people in situations where there had been a payment that exceeded the amount that was being proposed under the resolution adopting the special assessment, the reserve capacity assessment. And I felt that it was appropriate for the board to discuss the possible options in light of the fact that this undoubtedly, although in a limited number of cases, will probably come up. Typical example, a prior owner may have paid in full to facilitate closing the impact fee that may have been imposed. And now a subsequent owner or other owners occupy the premises, and the question of the refund comes up. The two obvious options would be A, to send a refund check to the current occupant of the premises, or B, which I recommend be considered seriously, to send a check to the household involved, but the check should be made payable to the party that apparently made the initial payment and the party who currently occupies the household, so that between them, they would resolve the issue as to who's entitled to what, leaving the village out of the decision-making process.
Why do you feel that would be the best way to go, Becker?
Well, my goal is always to try to keep the village out of a situation of controversy where the village does not need to be involved. And by sending it to one party or another, the village is basically making a determination which, from my perspective, will leave the other party claiming that the village improperly refunded money to a third party or another party that should have been sent to that individual. Oftentimes, you see situations where an insurance company, for example, admits that it has the obligation to pay for some damages, but there are two parties that are contesting who should get the benefit of the coverage. Oftentimes, what insurance companies do is they basically sue both parties, make a deposit with the court of the amount in controversy, and basically ask the court to resolve that conflict. What I'm proposing is not that formal or complicated. It would seem to me that if people did not foresee that there might be a refund, as was the case on the part of many of us here in the village, that reasonable people should be able to work it out without the village influencing what that outcome should be.
How many of these situations do you think we have? I don't know if this is a Brenda question or approximately.
5, 8, 10, probably less than 10.
Okay, a couple handfuls, that's it.
I just sent out an email to everybody from Drake Taxon and Katie Ebert about their situation. So it's just one of them that is be hopeful about what they would like to see.
But I think that legally, the transactions take place in the sale would have documentation. Right?
Right. I would also think that if someone prepaid in full and they were just in the process of selling their house, any homeowner who's selling the house is gonna add that cost onto the asking price of their home, because they're not gonna take that hit. They're
Right.
gonna pass it along.
Yep.
So I would feel that, the easiest thing to do is give that refund to the current homeowner, because in regards to that email that Amy had sent out, they made some really good points. How are you gonna find where that other person is? How are they gonna, resolve that issue with the current homeowner? And then, go to the bank and try to cash a check for $7,500 or $7,900 and try to split between the two of them. I think it's just gonna be a mess. I think it should probably go to the current homeowner. Because I feel that if they did just purchase that property, that cost of an impact fee was in the sale of their home.
But if we sold our house, just for an example, a year ago versus right now, so having a well versus city water, I don't think it would have made $8,000 worth of difference in the offer on the home. I think you could go either way, to be fair. I feel like I would agree with Hector at this point to be done with both parties, and then they'd have to get their own, real estate attorney or somebody to sort that out and go through the selling documents to see what was in it.
What about a third option where the refund amount simply gets split between the two parties and mailed individually, so there's no coordination issue required? And if one or the other parties felt that more involvement was necessary, or that they had a claim to more or less, or more, nobody's gonna call and say, hey, I shouldn't have got this much.
Right.
But if they felt they had a claim to more, then they could certainly then work it out amongst the two of them. Is that a possible option as well? That being said, I kind of agree with Steve, though. I figure, my assumption is that any transaction that happened during this period of time is likely the cost has already been factored into the sale price of the home, and it's more than likely been paid for by the whoever bought it.
I kind of like Hector's point where it keeps the village out of it. Sending it to the current homeowner. Because I think that's the safest way for the village to do it. And if there was something, like Kevin said, that was in the real estate documents, that shouldn't be the village's business.
That's not what Victor said.
Well, to send it to the current homeowner.
Okay, but Hector
Made
was-
out to both people.
Hector was.
Did
mentioning
you
that
say
it
to
would be
both parties?
Yes, right.
Okay.
Yes.
The current and the previous.
A jointly written check, putting the burden on the occupant to track down the seller. Oftentimes, there is some connection. People are unsure about appliances and things like that. They contact the seller, so.
I think it's gonna be easier for the current homeowner to track down who they bought the house from in the village in any regard.
Well, we have one of the affected parties here. We could ask him.
Could you say or on that check?
You're one of the affected
Yes,
parties, right?
right.
Do you have any knowledge of or the ability to contact the people you bought the house from?
So in our
You're under
case,
oath, but no, I'm kidding.
in our case, we purchased the property as part of an estate. So the woman who lived there passed away, her son became the executive of the estate. We never met him once during the entire process. All of our transaction was handled through our realtors. There was a couple of emails that our realtor sent to his realtor that got forwarded on to him to answer, and his answers came back to us through the game of telephone.
Do you know, did it go through a probate attorney?
I'm not aware of that, whether or not it did. But the sale of the property was as is. It was on the market for 70 days before we made an offer on it. But no, we have had no contact with that previous owner. And from the feel that we got during the sale of the property, he wasn't willing to budge on price, which I think we said in the letter was partly due to, like, we didn't know that he spent the $15,000 special assessment until after we bought the property. We just saw municipal water hookups, great, we didn't think anything of it. And then we found out from our neighbors that he paid the 15 grand in full, and we're like, oh, that explains why he wasn't willing to negotiate. And he has no interest in the property now either, as far as we're concerned. We own the bank, we own the property, the bank has a loan on it in our name. He is no longer tied to that property. The assessment was assessed to a property, not an individual, and the property was paid that amount, and so the refund should go back to the property.
Are you in the same situation, sir?
Me, no, I I own land on Beer Street and
Different scenario.
yeah,
Like the clean, cut and dried. Send one check. Homeowner. Makes it, current homeowner, makes it simple.
Yeah, that's kind of my preference too, Ron. I mean, I appreciate Hector's position as well. I just worry that we're putting people into a position where they have to go through a lot of undue efforts. And may never even come to any real resolution. And that would be a concern, is then what happens to the money? It's sitting out there, you know, what if at some point after 3 months, they're just simply unable to locate and make contact or get cooperation from this other party, then the money's just sitting out there. You got a check floating around that's, you know, not getting cashed.
If we-
And it's only good for X amount of days anyway, so.
If it's done that way and say, like in this example, we send the check to the current property owner and the old property owner finds out about it, or is he able to come back either on the village?
You have to take to court.
What's your thoughts on that, Hector, if it just goes to the current owner, that would that cut all ties to the village? If the previous owner decides to fight for it, wouldn't that be between the previous and the current owner?
I don't think so.
Well, let me put this in context. The village right now has been sued by someone who received a grant from the Community Foundation. And the claim that the individual is making, which resulted in the village having to activate its insurance coverage, is that the village should pay for the taxes that this person owes on this grant that no one foresaw would be coming to that individual. And the amount that is at issue is within the $10,000 limit, whether it's small claims court jurisdiction. So I could see the reason why I am advising what I'm advising is I could see the previous owner being frustrated, not getting anything, and bringing small claims action against the current home occupant and the village. It doesn't take much more than, the filing fee, which is less than $100. Not that this is an astronomical amount of money, but I think for most of us in this room, $7,000+ is something speaking up for. So that's the only reason. I don't have a strong interest. I think the fairest way is to say to people, look, here's the money, you guys decide. If you can't decide amicably or in a reasonable way, well, then why don't one of you sue the other in small claims court and duke it out there on the basis of your expectation? It's ironic. Here we are at the point of adopting a resolution, coming up with a solution to a problem that has been of concern in this community. We're fortunate to have a reduction in the amount that people have to pay. When you look at what other communities charge for a water hookup, it's a fraction of what it typically is. When you compare that to what the impact fee would have been for this year, had it been imposed, it would have been something just under $15,000. And so if we have a half a dozen or so number of people, I hope that they'll be reasonable about it. But there's no guarantee.
Is that what you're advising? Is that standard practice?
There is no such thing, standard practice. It just my advice based on my experience in terms of my goal to keep my municipal clients out of court and not tie up the clerk's time as a possible witness or the trustees, or for that matter, myself, in having to produce documents that could be brought to court.
And one question I have is, what if the village came up with a new unforeseen special assessment? Would you go back and try to extract money from someone who just sold their house within the last year and didn't know about this assessment?
Well, the village has to go through a process, and we will have to go through that same process going forward now that we are contemplating a reserve capacity assessment. In other words, if the board takes action tonight, you will lock in a fee of $7,900 and some odd for the people who are on the list within the reports that have been submitted. Going forward, any new infrastructure improvement or any expansion of the system will also have to go through that same process, which entails, number one, the village passing a preliminary resolution announcing its intent, giving people the opportunity to make their position known. Secondly, requiring the village consultant, which would include the village engineer and possibly Trilogy or some other comparable consultant, to come up with a report and then have a public hearing on that. And then finally pass a resolution. And it only really impacts people who are of record. We're talking about a fairness issue here. There is money to be returned. There's no question about the fact that someone on behalf of a particular property has paid more than what is being collected at this point in time. And the question is how to fairly refund the balance.
I think the question that Mr. Wood posed, though, was similar to the question that the homeowner is posing, in that it's a timing issue, right? So I think what Ben was trying to say is if we later, a year from now, added or created a new special assessment, we're not going to go back to the people that sold their property a year ago to try to collect from them. So conversely, why do we feel obligated to go back to someone that sold a year ago and give them this benefit when they're not the property owner anymore?
Well, again, I don't want to be making a case against the village here publicly, but the argument I would raise would be simply this. At the time that the property was sold, it would not be sold but for the fact that any lien against the property would be taken away. And the only way it would be taken away would be if somebody paid the money, either the buyer or the seller. And depending on the offered price and the circumstances where maybe you have an estate trying to liquidate a property where the beneficiaries are out of state and are indifferent versus where all the beneficiaries are in the neighborhood. And there was a very small estate and they would welcome additional money. It's a case by case kind of determination.
Right.
There is no uniform resolution. It's just a matter of trying to be practical to avoid further entanglement. That's my goal.
Right, because that offer letter could have had closing costs that had the new owner having a separate check written out to satisfy a lien to the village, rather than the existing homeowner writing that check based on the sale of the home. It could go either way. We don't know that.
Right.
You're
That
also
price could
saying-
have been built up by the seller to compensate for the initial outlet for the water. And I think that if that's the case, then we're saying it's up to us to decide whether that offer included
Right.
the assessment or not, and that's not our job. Our job right now is to fairly distribute that money, which is to the current homeowner, as far as I'm concerned. And I'll make a resolution to
A motion?
pay the current homeowner the $79 plus $100. As soon as we approve it.
I'll second that motion.
Brenda had a comment.
I was just going to say, isn't it also fair to say the person who paid the assessment should get the money back too? That may be their argument. What if they paid the 15,000? 6 months later, decided to sell their house. Now they no longer own it, but they did pay 15. But again, I see the point where it could have been jacked up, to cover their costs that they had already put in it. I just know with occupancy bonds or such things like that, we pay it back to the person who paid it originally.
You said this.
Resolution, I'll make a motion to pay the current homeowner the $79 plus $100 that we have in excess.
I'll second.
What information was $7,923?
Yes.
Is the amount of the special assessment, and
Sure.
it may vary, there's a surplus depending on how much was initially paid. So my recommendation would be that any refund due to overpayment be made directly to the current owner of record. At least that would be my recommendation for restatement. Your motion.
To read as Hector said.
I'll amend my second.
And we have a motion and second. Do we have any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
I was a no.
Brenda, you had that.
I'm sorry.
I think we should follow council's advice on this. I think real estate documents stand on their own. It's not a matter of who we think should get paid, it's a matter of legally who should get paid. And those would have been in the closing documents of a real estate transaction. And evident in that transaction, who paid for what. And if the person that sold the house paid everything, and it wasn't a responsibility for the new owner, they maybe included it with the price of the house to have the closing document done, or in the other effect, the new homeowner pays the tax lien with the closing costs of the house. And all those things could happen.
Yeah, but we
I'm
haven't
gonna
voted on
change
this
mine.
already, didn't we?
I'm gonna change mine
Well,
to
you
a
voted,
no
you
also.
can't change it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kevin said nay.
Only if the motion for reconsider. If a person voted with the majority, the person can move for reconsideration of the vote. In other words, someone who voted with the prevailing side can at this point make a motion to reconsider. If the motion gets a second, can be debated further, and no decision was made initially. And you revote again.
And make a motion to reconsider the vote.
We have a motion and second to reconsider the vote. Sure. You do a roll call vote, please, Brenda.
Reed,
No.
Ellis,
No.
Jensen,
Yes.
Summers,
I abstain.
the cat,
Yes.
Yates,
No,
No,
So we have a vote of 4-2. Majority carries. Item 7, pursuant to Wisconsin statute 66.0703. Subtitle 10, reopen and reconsider the special assessment authorized by resolution number 2020-11 dated November 9, 2020, having conducted a public hearing in that regard on October 11th, 2022, about the establishment of a to be known as resolution number 2022-11 for municipal water service. Be known as resolution number 2022-11 is intended to amend and supersede on its effective date the special assessment authorized by resolution number 2020-11 dated November 9, 2020, and to be utilized as a reserve capacity assessment in all land development situations or new connections to the municipal water system.
On the night of the public hearing that was held on the 11th of October, I distributed to each of the trustees a preliminary draft of the resolution. The reason why this is in the form of a resolution is that the reserve capacity assessment is a form of special assessment, except that it basically encompasses, the way it's worded, all the properties in the village that are capable of receiving water, and treats those that have had access to water in one fashion and those who are awaiting gain access in a different fashion for arrangement that's also permitted by statute. With regards to the people who have had access to water, it obligates them to pay that assessment. And the gist of the resolution is that they can pay that assessment in one lump sum, or if they wish, they can pay it in installments over a period of 20 annual installments, provided they make the payment in a timely fashion and provided they reimburse the village for the interest carrying costs of this installment arrangement. It further indicates that as to any property in the future that does not have access to water at this point in time, that they will be subject to the same base calculation times the cost of the village's borrowing obligations at some point in the future when the system is extended. And also they will be subject to a recalculation of the inflation costs associated with the construction of those future improvements. In addition, within this resolution, there is a directive for the calculation or the process for providing refunds to individuals. You will see, for example, on commencing on line 107, different scenarios where people have made partial payments, have made complete payments, and the end result of those scenarios is stated now will also be subject to the protocol that you've adopted in your previous motion as to who is to be the recipient of a refunded amount. Finally, the resolution covers notification procedures which are statutorily in nature. And if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to attempt to answer them. Yes, sir.
So the intent of the additions that we talked about as staff with trustee Yates earlier this afternoon was also to, in light of the fact that this final resolution is going to get mailed out to the owner of every single tax key in the village. And so we wanted to explicitly add a couple points on exemptions, which start on line 70. And then as Hector just pointed out on line 107 to talk about the various scenarios that apply to the assessments. And again, just to reiterate, starting around line 205 to talk about how the fee will be escalated upward for those who connect far out in the future or decide to hold out still beyond 2022. So hopefully, when we, after tonight, if this gets passed, we'll generate a cover letter and then prepare a mailing to send this out to all the tax fees.
And the effective lock-in date, if you will, of this reserve capacity assessment becomes the date that the notification steps detailed here in paragraph 11 and 12 are accomplished. That you'll find on page 5, which is a mailing, as has been indicated, of this resolution and notification of the installment assessment possibility.
Ben, do you want to maybe just clarify for the rest of the board and any of the public that are here or watching? Just in brief terms, the exemptions in the areas that, even though we're sending this to every tax key and every property, we know that there are large areas in the community that are not affected by this, but due to the notice requirements, they will be receiving this.
Yeah, correct. So that would include Whispering Ridge condominiums. Well, the intent is anyone that paid a water connection fee, which in all likelihood was an impact fee, prior to 2021 is exempt. Anyone that connected in 2021 and paid an impact fee for their connection, because the RCA is basically the same amount as the impact fee, they're exempt. This doesn't apply to them. Furthermore, in 2022, any properties that paid a water impact fee that would most likely be new construction, like up in Overstone, if they've already paid a water impact fee, they're exempt from the RCA. So exempted areas specifically include Whispering Ridge condos, anyone that was a water customer before 2021, that would include like the properties that connected along Landon Road as part of the elementary school project extension. That would include Whispering Ridge Estates, phases 1 and 2. Some of Whispering Ridge Estates North have likely already paid, but going forward, they would just pay the RCA, and it's the same dollar amount. Landon Estates is exempted from this. And then there would be a couple other, if folks like Landon Tank or Mibs and Bibs that connected years ago, they would be exempted from this. There are a couple of people that live across the street from Don. One in particular comes to mind is Mike Muehlbauer. He actually paid his fee in 2020 so that he got the 2020 rate instead of waiting to connect in 2021. He's already connected. He's already paid a fee. He's exempted from the RC.
And Rock Point Village Apartments.
And Rock Point Village has paid the impact fees for all 3 phases of their apartments already.
Thank you. If we don't have any specific questions, I'll make a motion, or people need time to read through this a little further.
Just going off of the agenda here, item number 5 was resolution 20-22-11, as is this one. I didn't know if that was intentional or if this one should be renumbered. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding the reference to this resolution.
Yeah.
I think that's the case. Sorry.
So the first one was to repeal the
With an ordinance amendment.
Okay.
impact fee ordinance.
The reason why this resolution is mentioned is that this is the operative legal document.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2022-11.
I'll second. We have a motion and second. Is there any more discussion? Roll call vote, please, Brenda.
Reed,
Yes.
Ellis,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Summers,
Abstain.
Jensen, sorry,
Yes.
Yates,
Yes.
Pickett.
Yes.
Motion carried. Item 8, consideration and possible adaptation of an ordinance. Pardon me? Adoption. Possible adoption of an ordinance codifying the establishment of a reserve capacity assessment process to be utilized in all land development situations or new connections to the municipal water system following the effective date of the reserve capacity assessment referenced in item number 5 above.
In your materials, you should have received an ordinance codifying the use of a reserve capacity assessment. And as I said before, in order to implement a reserve capacity assessment, you have to go through the process that is required by statute for the imposition of a special assessment, which entails the use of a resolution. The distinction between a resolution and an ordinance is a very fine distinction, and the ordinance typically is codified in the Code of Ordinances. A resolution is recorded in the minutes of the village, has the same legal effect as an ordinance, except that it's a one-shot type of proposition. Some communities, for example, the adjoining community of Sussex, also has a reserve capacity assessment process that they utilize. And to facilitate informing developers or anyone hooking up to the services that are covered by those reserve capacity assessments, they have adopted an ordinance that is codified and pops up when there is some kind of a search done. I am not asking that you enact this tonight, but instead that you give it some consideration, because this is patterned after the Sussex ordinance situation, and it may require some refining. But at the same time, it is important, in my opinion, that you take this up in November on the 14th, when you next meet. And your thoughts and comments would be appreciated tonight or between now and the next meeting in that regard.
I'll make a motion to table item number 8 until the November regularly scheduled board meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and second to table item 8. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Discussion and possible action on purchasing meter reading system for the water utility.
So obviously with our agreement with Sussex, we have, they are not reading our meters in the future, and then Falls obviously is not reading our meters. So we need the testing to read the meters that are out there and integrate them into our billing system. In your packets, I believe there was an email in there with some options that were presented to us. Midwest metering, Sussex uses them, Menominee Falls uses them. So that was my first contact out to find out what the options were for the system we are being left with. So Steve is here, maybe he can answer questions or help decide which direction we need to go.
So I'm going to, if you don't mind for just a second, sir. Do we want to run through the fact that there are in fact 2 different options here and that they're very different in scope and capability, or do we want to let this gentleman go ahead and then we can discuss afterwards, or?
Either way. however you want.
Did everyone appreciate the fact that there's two very different
Yeah.
scenarios here? Okay, all right, you're on.
So I can describe a little bit, well, let me make sure I understand your situation if I could, and I can describe a little bit about what I sent in the email. My name is Steve Dahlstrom with Midwest Meter. We are the Badger Meter Distributor for the Midwest, so 6 states in the Midwest. We have 4 offices around that geography. One is in Jackson. So I live just down the street, just about 15 minutes from here, which is kind of nice. You have a Badger metering system out in your distribution system right now, but my understanding is you have no way to read them. Menominee Falls was doing that. Now Sussex is contracted to install and maintain the meters in the distribution system, but you need a way to get those meter reads from the meters themselves into your billing software so that you can see the bill and get paid. So since you have a base Badger meter system, I offered 2 potential options for you to purchase the software that's required to run that system, which Menominee Falls does have. You don't have access to anymore. And read what you have and expand that system from there in a couple of different ways. One is by utilizing the same type of equipment that you have right now, which is driving by or walking by the homes and businesses to gather that reading information. And another is a way to do that remotely so that you don't have to make that trip eventually out into the system to gather that data. It would come in automatically into the software that Badger Metering would provide for you. And that information then could be transported into billing so that you can generate that. So it's the difference between sort of a semi-automatic or semi-manual system that you have right now and the capability of continuing, or a system that you could move to more fully automatic. The difference is the reading equipment cost. As you notice that the first option is more expensive because it entails the purchase of a fairly expensive piece of meter reading equipment that reads what you already have and also could read what you put in. And it also entails some additional software and annual fees that Badger Meter would assess for that particular product. The alternative is to migrate you out of what you have into the more automated system. A village your size, it's very cost effective to move to a fully automatic system. We would have to deal with the equipment that you have in the field right now to be able to continue to read it or migrate it to the newer product. But you can still get the full value out of those transmitters and meters that are in your system now over time. And the suggestion I made was to purchase a piece of used equipment that's much less expensive than the new equipment if you were going to transition out of what you have into a more fully automated system. So it would give you the ability to continue to read what you have by driving by or walking by those homes and businesses while you migrate to the new product. That's the essence of it. I mean, I can answer questions. I just kind of gave a sketch to Brenda, just an overview of what could happen. So you could also change everything out in a short period of time and have a fully automated system if you chose to spend the money to do that. And there are multiple ways that could happen as well. So we just outline some things for you to think about. And we can come back to you with some other options or proposals or commentary that you see.
How many meters did the Falls say they have, or Mid-City has, Brenda? How much time do we have before we have to have a decision made?
Don't know what the occupancy schedules are, but I'm assuming that there's going to be Overstone occupancies and West Spring Ridge occupancies in the next few weeks. I don't know how many Mid-City has out there, but he said he was going to drop off extra meters here. He said they had a few. I don't know what that is, but, or how many that is, but we did purchase them. I mean, I paid for them through to Menominee Falls, so they should in essence come back to us. So we would have some on hand, but I don't know how many that is.
Last I heard was 12.
Okay. Well, that would be good for probably the next month or so, but, you know, in the next 6 months, we'll probably need 30 to 40, so.
But good, it's the larger challenge, just getting the red. So supply is not a problem.
And I believe you guys were the ones that you kind of did some things with your parent company to shore up supply chain things, so you don't really have any issues with that, is that correct? Or-
Well, for us,
Yeah, for you guys.
well, there's all kinds of supply chain issues right now in a lot of different ways. We're a distributor of Badger products, so we do have a warehouse in New Jackson. So I think we can supply you what you need, no matter what choice you make.
Ron, what was your thought?
Spot.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Basically, it just comes down to me for cost. With the fully automated system, we eliminate having someone go through, and I know in the past we've talked about having the police department do it because they're patrolling. And is that a pain? Maybe, but is it convenient and cost effective for us? Yes. I'm inclined to go with the existing system that we have and integrate a radio option or the cloud option that we all saw here last week as a phase in.
So can you talk a little bit more about your automated system and what that really means?
Sure, that entails a cloud-based software, you mentioned cloud, and cloud-based software that's accessible from anybody with an internet browser. It also allows the resident themselves to gather their own meter reading information from the networked transmitters, not the ones you drive by. And you would have 15-minute interval information from those meters that are connected to that system. It reads through a cellular network, so whether it's AT&T or Verizon, Badger Meter is by far and away the largest provider of those type of systems and one of the best suppliers of that product. There are other products out on the market that are less expensive. If you're looking for simply cost, there are other products that you can choose that are less expensive than the Badger product. I think what you'll find is the quality of the Badger system is exceptional. I think the support that you would receive from our company, being local and personal, is also exceptional. We hire people that are lifelong water industry people to do this work, and we've been doing it for utilities around the state of Wisconsin for as is Badger Meter as well. So Badger Meter is one of the larger three. There are three main suppliers of this product. Badger Meter is one of those three.
Can you retrofit the existing meters to be cloud accessible?
We can, Badger Meter has that option. That's right. So if you had that is the thing, if you have meters in the system that don't need to be changed based on PSC requirements or accuracy requirements, you can simply update the meters that you have.
You don't have to replace the meter itself.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And as I mentioned before, if you didn't want to move quickly to a cloud system, you could still, with our system, read both what you have until the batteries expire. Most of the products that you have in your system are the Orion CE product that you've been buying from Menominee Falls or they've installing for you. Those have a 20-year life. So the battery in those last 20 years, I don't know when they were installed, you may have some record of that, but you can continue to use that product as you integrate the other product into the system, reading them both through the same software from Badger Meter and importing it into billing whenever you need to bill.
Then do you install meters at the wells as well so that we can kind of calculate loss in the system by backing out the individual meters?
That's a good question. We don't do the installation ourselves, but we sell the well meters, the product itself. And almost every utility in Wisconsin uses the Badger Meter for that purpose. That could be integrated into that cloud-based system. If the nice thing about that, if the whole system was done with the automated system, you can get really good information on how much water is coming in, how much water you're billing out, and what the difference is. Right? So where's the other water going, whether it's leaks or calculated errors and things of that nature. It is a feature of that system.
Right. Or bulk water centers that aren't getting
that as well.
marked.
Yep, you can also put this transmitter on fire hydrant meters. that you might rent out or loan, or hydrants, whatever it might be, so you're accounted. Badger Meter, the other thing about this system is, to be honest, Badger Meter is one of the leading suppliers of this product. They're adding features all the time. Some of those include things like pressure monitoring to help assess for leaks. Where there's a pressure surge and you may have a leak or a pressure decrease, and there may be some sort of backflow issue and things of that nature. They're also integrating water quality monitoring into the system so that you can actually do real-time water quality monitoring throughout the system. What you'll find is the Badger Meter system will be a little more expensive. It's a little more feature rich, but it's also on the leading edge of providing these technology products for the industry. There are other manufacturers that come along and try to provide a niche in there and copy what Badger Meter is doing. The Badger Meter is really, they're on the leading edge of some of this technology. And quite frankly, I don't know if you've noticed, the technology is moving rather rapidly, and so is regulation. So they're trying to do their job.
So your option 2 is like or option 1, excuse me, is like, that would be the new equipment, the upgrade or using the cloud-based system. This would cover all of our existing meters supposedly, or we're not sure if we'd have to maybe upgrade some of them.
Yeah,
What would be the cost to upgrade a meter, for example, that wasn't like compatible with this? You know,
about $250, I would say. It's close to it. I mean, if I could, so option 1, would you like me to distinguish between option 1 and option 2 just a little more?
sure.
So option 1 is taking the system that you have out in the distribution system, all the older Orion CE products, adding the software that you'll need to read that with, and also new equipment that you'll need to read that current drive-by system, and giving you the ability to continue to drive by with the newer Badger Meter products. So I included that as a means for you to do exactly what you're doing now and continue with it. So that's the newer handheld equipment is required to read both the old product that is actually discontinued, but still viable, and the new product that Badger Meter has come out with. So that's option 1. Option 2 was to try to avoid purchasing that pretty expensive reading equipment that, quite frankly, is a handheld computer that needs to be replaced regularly, like any computerized piece of equipment. So option 2 is to avoid that purchase. You still have to have the same software product. You can still read with the option of purchasing a used piece of equipment to read what you have now while you integrate in the network product, the cellular product.
What do you think would be a reasonable expectation for a lifespan of that used piece of equipment?
Probably 5 or 7 years.
And what's the lifespan of a new piece of equipment?
Must not be running.
Not much longer than that, to be honest. And they're about $12,000 right now. They're not cheap.
And then the software or the with both options. Also with option 2 and the used equipment, you don't have the annual fee, but with the new one, there's a $900 per year for the software, but that's not, you wouldn't need to do that in option 2.
That's correct.
So we'd just be looking at like the $1.32 per meter.
That's for the drive-by meters, the ones you have, and the $11 and change per year for the network meters.
I mean, I think the size of our community.
I mean, 400 meters. Yeah, I mean, you can.
I think what you'll end up doing, if I could, you'll end up probably spending more on the drive-by system, or at least as much, because of the equipment repurchasing over time, because of the extra fees. Whereas your community is small enough for that network product, I think, and you can do whatever you like, and I'll lay out both options much more clearly than in just a simple email. But I do think there is a lot of value in the network product because you get a lot of information, you have a lot of future migratability to new products and features, functionality there. It allows your consumers to see their readings anytime they want to, whether it's over the internet or on an app on the phone. There are some extra things that come along with it. But again, it was preliminary.
I really like that, though.
It is the future.
And Ben, village engineer.
I don't.
Hi. So I don't get involved much in metering infrastructure, so some of my questions will be rather basic, but if I'm understanding correctly, there's kind of two options. Well, two separate conversations going on here that are getting a little intertwined.
Yep.
One is for right now, in order to read the meters out in the system, do you want to go with the emailed option one of purchasing new meter read equipment? Or emailed option two, used meter reading equipment? And I think no matter what the village decides to do with future technology, you got to make one of those choices to be able to keep reading meters.
That's a nice clarification, Don. The software is the same.
And then the second conversation that's going on here is moving forward as a community, do you want to stick with the drive-by system and that technology for the long term? Or since you're getting to a point where a lot of your meters that were installed in 2007 are, you know, at the end of another 5 years are going to have to be replaced, do you start from this point forward installing new meters with the centralized cloud-based infrastructure? So you might only do, you know, 10 or 15 of those a year for the first few years. But then in 5 years, you're gonna do 100 of them. And then further on down the line, you'll do another big chunk of them and go that route. So I just think if I got that right, the village needs to decide, how do you want to keep reading your current meters separately moving forward? What trajectory do you want to go down? Because it's my impression that every year that you continue to install the meters with the drive-by system is going to make it that much harder to ever change in the future, because the cost to retrofit is about $250 a meter to switch that technology. And the cost of a meter altogether is
Probably 3.25.
3.25. So obviously the lion's share of the cost of a meter installation has to do with what technology transmitter head you put on that thing. And from what I've understood, and to be fair with you, a couple members of the board and I heard a presentation virtually from Metron. So maybe that puts a little framework around a couple of the questions you've heard. But, you know, you'll go for a period of time where you're reading meters with two different methods. Drive-by for all the older stuff and just cloud-based for all the newer stuff. Presumably you would have a way to integrate that into billing software, so it's not a chore.
Correct. So with the Badger meter system, you would do that all, it'd all be unified through one software, through one interface in the building. You could, for example, take the Metron system on the side and use to that system, have an interface with their software product in the building as well. It's a much lower price system. A handful of people use it. Most of the people that I know that have used it don't use it anymore. So that's a common thing. Actually common over about the last 25 years of this business. So I think what you find is make a decision how you want. Price is an important thing. And it also depends on how fast you do it, like you're saying, and when you want to make that switch. When you want to make the decision, if you're going to do it all at once or over time. Yeah, I think what you find is you want to be able to read the meters and get the information where you want it to be. The system will work well, and you want to have it supported, and you want to know where you can get it fixed, and you want to know moving forward as technology advances, and not have a system where oftentimes the technology is stagnant, and the industry moves on, and then they come out with another product. We need another industry for the moment when there's a lot of change happening. I mean, quite honestly, we're right down the street.
So, I mean, I would, obviously, option 2 seems to make more sense for the immediate need. My additional concern is unfortunately, in the last probably 3 years, we've put in about 300 meters in the last 3 years.
Out of a total, if I could, out of a total of how many?
400 something.
420.
So, they're all pretty new. So even if we go, moving forward, I mean, as much as I would love to have that technology available to us, it's just unfortunate that we weren't able to have the benefit of making this decision before. But we didn't anticipate our contract being either, so. But it is something where we would at least have the option then of we could update meters over time. There's just that incremental cost of per meter.
Yeah, so you could get the full viability out of the existing transmitters that you bought. So there's an investment there. Or replacement costs. If they just been put in the last few years, it's the last 20 years total. And I have to say, doing this for about 25 years with Badger Meter, when they say 20 years, it should be 20 years. I don't expect them to fail before 18 or 19 years.
There's no residual value to that net that comes out and gets replaced.
Not really. Nobody's buying used equipment as far as that's concerned. So that's right. So it's not difficult to get the software installed and get you even a piece of used equipment to read what you have. And continue along that line as long as you like. And then you can incrementally add in whatever else you want to as you see fit, decide on what type of product you can move forward.
But moving forward, we should probably be incorporating meters that have this capability.
What would that do for the water loss calculation you have to do, Brenda? Would the mix of the old and new have any difference to what you have to do? And what does, now, is Land and Estates will continue to be read off of 1 meter, correct? So what goes on there is nothing that we're impacting. So pretty much what we have to do is come up with a replacement time frame, because if this reader, if we have a 5-year expectancy and that breaks, right now we're looking at 12 grand for a new one.
Well, whether it's today or 5 or 6 years from now.
Well,
I mean, I don't know
that's,
what to do then. You can always buy a new one later.
if we went with the used one today, would it be wise to implement changing out 20% of our system a year? So when that piece becomes outdated, that we don't have to replace it, that we would be better off going to the cloud-based system then?
I could. It depends on how hungry you are for data. I mean, if you really have pretty new transmitters, you've got a long life yet on just driving by. So, I mean, one option utilities often do is they'll find the more significant meters in the system and replace those with a network transmitter. Maybe it's, what is this, Land and Estates you're talking about? Is this, so you may have meters beyond that. You've got a master meter that meters beyond that, plus you've got your well meter that brings the water into the system. Some of those meters are more important than others. You can gather some of that information with a network transmitter and leave your drive-by transmitters alone if you like to get the full value out of what you have there. One feature of the software is the ability to sub-meter district metering. So you can take a look at, like you were mentioning, that well meter, how much water is coming into the system. Let's make sure that's accurate. And I have regular data on that. And you'll have a reset point every month or quarter when you read everything in town, where you can check against that. But on the network meters, you can actually do the same thing in smaller detail, like Land and Estates. You've got a cellular transmitter on the main meter going in there, and you can sub down to that meters and see how accurate or where the water loss might be at that point. There's a lot of analytical things you can do in software of this type.
But I think that's a decision that we can continue to evaluate, right? And, but I mean, you're gonna need an answer pretty soon, right? I mean, what's the cost of these newer meters versus the the regular ones that we're buying now? What's the cost difference?
Not that much more. It's only maybe 20 or 25, maybe $25 more. I have to look. The cost difference comes into the annual fee that goes behind it to be able to acquire that. So,
And that's the $11.40
correct.
plus the annual fee of 900 and the $1.32 per meter.
Well, again, if you're, for the annual fee of the $900 is not an issue if you're using the used equipment.
Okay.
If you go all network. The other thing I'll mention too is there are no other software fees. Those are the fees. So
Okay.
there's no Starkville service agreement, no access fee, nothing. Those are the only fees.
So we'd be just looking at the 1140 per meter.
If everything was done with cellular, which will take time.
Right.
Based on what we know.
Yes, Hector.
I have a few questions. If the village were to buy the used equipment, what sort of warranty comes with that?
None,
None.
but we have other used equipment that we work with you on. So,
Oh, yeah, another one.
no, well, maybe you're loaning something. I mean, honestly, we'll do whatever we can do to help you. You're in the spot,
Okay.
to be honest.
Now,
I can see the problem that you have.
one of the features of the more sophisticated system is the data mining that could be done. I take it you're familiar with the scope of our system here and personnel. Who do you anticipate would be doing that? Would it be Sussex? Would it be our clerk? Would it be somebody that we would have to hire to do that?
I think it would probably be your clerk.
I was just saying, that would be me. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how I do it now. I get the readings from Menominee Falls. I upgrade it into the system and calculate all the billings. So, I mean, I don't anticipate that changing. I think it will just be easier if I have a system that puts all meter readings for all meters into my billing software.
Right. With the extra 2.5 days, you'll then have available,
Yes,
you can look at some data
right.
instead of using Excel and
And manually entering my meter readings.
If I could, I mean, our tech support folks, which you would be working manually with, either Mandy or Josh in Wisconsin, they also know the billing software. So not only do they know the Badger meter software really well, they know the billing software and the interface that goes between them well. So honestly, what I think you'll find, Brendan, is you'll have access to software support through the billing provider, but oftentimes our tech support people are better at it than they or the Badger meter folks because they have kind of more global knowledge. And they want the utility clerks through.
What is the scope of that support? 15 hours at installation and then an hourly rate thereafter? How does that work?
That's a good question. For general support, we don't charge anything extra for tech support above and beyond the installation of the product. So we do have a no charge tech support generally. We do have a partner support program that you can opt for, which is like $1,200 a year, which includes a lot of on-site support, being able to help the clerk, quarterly or even monthly if necessary, make that file transfer from the billing software into the meter reading software and back and forth. That's needed for maybe 10% of utilities. So some utility clerks have difficulty operating a computer and some really don't. So there are clerks that just have difficulty, quite honestly, with transferring files and things of that nature and just turning on a computer sometimes. They need extra help. I don't anticipate that here, and most places aren't like that. So
Yeah, Hector, you had a question about data mining, and to be fair, I'll go off of what I learned a little bit from Metron, which is competing but comparable
we can talk about it.
data mining package, so to speak, or cloud-based system. So in either rate, it's actually the homeowner that does a lot of the data mining, right? Like, so it can flag if you have a lot of background water use during abnormal times of the day. It'll kind of get pinged as you might have a leak somewhere on the property. There's low temperature things that you were talking about, low pressure. Some things that, I don't know, some folks might never touch, but some folks will use a lot. But the trick is, like, right now, if someone has a water leak, they're probably not gonna find out until the end of the billing cycle when they get their water bill, and they're gonna see that their water bill is really high. And Public Service Commission rules don't allow you to have any kind of grace with the property owner. PSC rules, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if the water goes through the meter, you have to charge it. There's no discretion for, hey, I had a leak or whatever. So to that end, with the cellular system where if folks have an app that they can look at as much as they want, or sometimes it'll just ping the clerk that, hey, this account has high water use, and you can do a little bit of, I don't know what you want to say, just a little shepherding that way of,
Right.
to try to curb off issues before they become really out of control. And real quick, the thing that I see either way being attractive about having the cellular transmitter on the land and estates meter. So that's a mobile home park, and the village just bills them through one master meter. And then the operator of that community has different meters, private meters, so that they sub-meter. But the trick is they have a lot of old brittle pipes, and they can go a long period of time without noticing a leak. So I think knowing that they have issues downstream, it would almost be a courtesy to them to get a cellular meter on that one, so that they could react a lot more quickly. I don't know
That's a
what
good
that would
point.
look like. but-
Yeah, that's easy because that would integrate directly into the same software that we use to read everything else. As far as those features that you were talking about, you're right, that those are features that can be set up for individual users within the utility. So Brendan, anybody else that wants to see it, because it's cloud-based access, you just have a password and you can allow access to that product. You can set your own alerts, some of those same alerts that you're talking about, potential leaks or backflow situations, or potential freezing situations. So that the utility can have those alerts, but so can the consumer. They can set their own alerts as well, and be alerts to those things. So set a freeze alert. If they're down in Florida and all of a sudden the water gets colder than it should, below 34 degrees, or they want to set it at, they can get an alert for that. If water is used when it shouldn't be used, they're down in Florida and they think there should be no consumption going to the meter, and all of a sudden there is. I mean, did the pipe just freeze and break, or somebody living in the basement? I mean, who knows what's happening? Right? There's all kinds of possibilities. So they can be alerted to that, which allows them to be smarter about their own. Yeah, those are all common features. Graphically represent the usage over time, the consumption over time, globally for the utility, or in a sub metering environment, or individually. Someone calls, how I've been using my water. And you can show them 15-minute incremental data as to how it was used for the last 6 months. Tell when they filled the pool.
I would be in favor
What's the lifespan on
of buying I'd be in favor of buying the used equipment
Right.
for now.
And then
Purchasing the cellular meters going forward and having further discussion about any plans to retrofit older ones
Yeah, upgrade.
at a future meeting.
I agree.
Well, if you're looking at $65 to difference between an upgrade and a replace the entire meter. But there's that choice, which I think is important. Because if the meters go 20 years, if you retrofit them, you're at 70% of the cost versus replacing them.
You just had replaced 3 years ago.
Right,
Why you-
so,
Right.
Yeah, what you're
but
finding.
that's not something we have to decide now. It's
Right,
just-
that's why I'm saying at a
So,
future meeting, we
just
can
need to
develop
right now-
a plan to, maybe incrementally upgrade the system if we want to, or we just wait until they're ready and we phase them out.
Yeah.
then.
I think we should just like to get back to option 1 or option 2, and I think I'll make a motion.
Hector's got a comment.
Go ahead, Victor.
If the village were to purchase the new meter reading equipment, what sort of warranty is there? You said there was none for the used equipment.
Yeah, I think it's a 2-year warranty.
We, why such a short period?
So we give them our electronic products.
So I'll make the motion that we at this point go with option 2 for our meter reading, which includes the Beacon software and then the used piece of reading equipment with the total dollar amount of $11,350.
We have a motion and second. Do we have any more discussion?
I guess the only thing that I would add is, do we want to officially make the decision right now whether or not we want to purchase the upgraded cellular meters moving forward, so Brenda knows what to do?
Yeah, I will amend that then, that we also include that moving forward, any new meters would be the upgraded cellular capable meters.
We have a motion and second. Any more discussion? Brenda, are you satisfied with the software for year end for billing and all your reports?
Yeah, well, we have work to do on the other end of that. So.
But this will work for you at this time?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
You have a software product you have now, so Banyan was it?
Yes.
You're thinking about moving to another software product perhaps?
Workers.
There will be an interface that will be included in the price that we gave, one interface. You can pick. If you choose wisely, right? So it's fine,
think
but if
we
you
know
move,
which way
but
we're
if you
gonna
move
go.
to another, there will be
Yes.
another interface fee, and I think it's a couple $1,000.
Right.
I'm just want to make that clear. There's work to be done there in that interface. It's not free.
I think we're pretty sure, right?
I could work pretty sure.
You can do 2 if you want. You have what you want.
We just may move forward.
Thank you.
And do you offer any volume discount pricing on those
We
conversions?
will do everything we can both to get you the best price and get you the product.
I'm in sales too, that means no.
Do we have any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you for your time.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and second to adjourn. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah. That's on here. So we gotta get it up on.
I know you're not just for your player.
Yeah, it should be in the looking for a good game. Yeah.
It is big fantasy.
From what I, yeah, because I've only been here for.